Welcome. This demo is on using the Edge Manageability Framework command line interface. And we're going to take it from onboarding an Edge node all the way to deploying an application. Okay, I'm going to use our CLI to do four things. I'm going to provision an Edge node, create a cluster, load an application in the catalog, and then deploy that application. In my window here, you can see that there are two windows. One of them is a command line interface at the bottom, and at the top we have the graphical user interface that we can look up there and see what's going on as we execute these commands in the CLI. Now I have already logged into my CLI, and it's already set up to talk to this orchestrator. So first thing I'm going to do is collect some information that I need to register the host. I'm going to list the available sites. There's one site, and this is its site ID. It's this site 8BF right there. And then I need to list the OS profiles. So I'm going to do that. And then we can see there's 5 different operating systems we can load. I'm going to choose this Ubuntu 2204.5. Now, in order to register this host with the CLI, we need to create a CSV file. That's a comma-separated value file. And the reason we're going to do that is because the CLI supports bulk onloading of hosts, and you can put many hosts in a CSV file at the same time. So I've actually already created that file, and you can see what parameters I put in it. This first line is just a header. We don't need to fill that in. But the second line down here is our actual data. We have the serial number of the host, H1SEK44. That is something I got by looking at the physical host itself. Then we have the OS we want to load, which is Ubuntu 2204.5. And finally, we have the site ID that we want to use, 8BF91A8. With that file created, we can import this into the orchestrator. So I'll do that. And it has uploaded that, and we should, in just a moment, we'll see it pop up there in my graphical user interface. I can see that host is up there. It's in unknown status because it's waiting to be provisioned. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to reboot that host, and that host is going to connect, and we'll begin the process of provisioning the Edge node, and you'll be able to see that status in the GUI screen as it provisions. I'm going to speed this up. Okay, now we can see our Edge node is fully online and provisioned. If I go in here and I do a list hosts, I can see it sitting there, and it's running, it's provisioned. We've got a serial number, and we've also got its host ID. I can get some more information about the host. I'm going to do a get host, and I will copy in this identifier. And we can see a bunch of stuff that the CLI can tell us about the host, including, information about its network interfaces, its USB interfaces, its storage info, its model number, the type of CPU. And up here, what I need here is I need this UUID because I'm going to use this when I go to create the cluster. So I will copy that down to a safe place. And then I'm going to go in and start getting the information I need to create a cluster. The first thing I need to know is the cluster templates. We look at that. There's 3 different cluster templates available. They are baseline, privileged, and restricted. Restricted has the most restrictions on the applications that can be loaded, and privileged has the least restrictions. So we will go with the privileged template. Our next task is going to be to issue the command that will create the cluster. So I'm going to paste that command here. I'm also going to switch my user interface over here to the clusters page, which you can see has no clusters in it now. And I've done this create cluster command. I've given it a name for the cluster, cluster JF208. I told it the node. I want it to have all Kubernetes roles, and I've told it the template that I want to use. So let me hit that. And we see that up there in our user interface, the cluster has popped up, and it has started to install the cluster. And I will speed this up. The cluster is now active. The next thing to do is to load an application into our catalog. There's several different ways to do that. The way that I like to do it is to describe my application as a series of YAML files. So I have created a set of YAML files for WordPress. So I'll go through the files kind of from the bottom up here so you can see all of the files that go into making a deployment package. First, let's look at the registry file. That is this one here. And it describes the location where we're going to get the Helm chart from, which is the Bitnami Helm registry. And we can see here that we've got the URL for that registry in there. The registry has a name. The name is Bitnami. Now the next thing we have, that describes where the chart comes from. The next thing we have is the application. And the application gives some information about the application. You can see we've got its name, its version, a description of it, the link to the registry, so it's going to come from the Bitnami registry, and the chart name out of that registry is WordPress, and the version of the chart that we're going to pull from that. And then finally, it has profiles. Our applications can have multiple profiles, which are sets of common settings. And we've got one profile here called default, and it has a values file name, which is values WordPress 020. So if we look inside of that values file, this is just a values.yaml file that would go into any Helm chart. So there's some various stuff about configuring the image and the database, where to get the images from, some passwords for the database, admin password for WordPress. This is all just sample stuff for a demo here. And then some information about the service. Now I've got a special annotation on the service which allows the service to be used with something we call service link in the orchestrator graphical user interface. And I'll show you that at the very end of the demo. So that is the values.yaml file. So at this point, we've got everything necessary to specify the application in its Helm chart. There's one last step to making a deployment package, which is to create the deployment package itself. Now, the way our deployment packages are designed is that you can aggregate many applications and deploy them as a unit. We're not going to do that today. We're just going to deploy one application, which is WordPress. So the deployment package is very simple. It's just a simple wrapper around that application. So it's got a name, a display name, a description, a version. You can ignore the artifacts. That was for putting icons in the GUI. Then we've got a list of the applications. I said this is just a one-to-one correspondence. So the only application in the WordPress deployment package is the WordPress application. And then we need to do the same one-to-one correspondence with something we call deployment profiles. So we'll create a profile in the deployment package, and it will contain exactly one profile, which is the default profile out of WordPress. And the deployment package profile ended up being called testing here. So we'll need to pay attention to that because when we go to deploy our application, we'll want to specify which profile we want to use. Okay, so those are the files that will need to go into our deployment package when we upload it. So all I need to do now is to hit the command to upload these to the orchestrator. Let me go over here to the deployment packages page in the UI. We can see that it is empty here. There are no deployment packages available. I'm going to hit this upload command. And we can see a deployment package has appeared in the GUI up there. And we can list those deployment packages. We can see there's a bunch of these other ones are extensions that came with the orchestrator. They're in a special tab up here on the GUI. We're not going to do anything with those. But one new one has showed up, which is WordPress. And it's a normal application. As I mentioned, the default profile is called testing. It's not deployed yet. And it's got one application in it. So let's take that deployment package and go ahead and deploy it. For that, we're going to use the create deployment command. We've got to tell it what package we want to deploy. We want to deploy WordPress. We want to deploy version 0.2.0 of the deployment package. We give it the display name we want it to have. We're going to tell it what profile. We want that testing profile. And we need to tell it which cluster ID we want to go into. If you remember back to when I was creating the cluster, I gave it the cluster name cluster-jf208. And because a deployment package can have multiple applications, we need to specify these cluster IDs for each application that might be in the deployment package. There's only one, so we have WordPress equals JF208. Let me move this deployment screen over here to the deployments page, which we can see there are no deployments sitting there. I will hit this, and it will upload the deployment. And we will see the deployment is now in here and it's in deploying stage. So it'll take just a few moments for that deployment package to deploy to our Edge cluster. I'm going to speed this up. Okay, we can see our WordPress is installed and running on that cluster. We can, that's the extent of what we're going to do with the CLI. We can go into the deployment package here in the GUI, and I can show you that everything is up and healthy in here. But what I'd like to do is demonstrate the service link feature. So right now I'm looking at the deployed instance of WordPress on the JF208 cluster. I can open this up and look inside. I can see its pods are healthy, and I can see its services cut. And we can see that one of these services has a clickable link here, this ADTCP. And that has to do with that service annotation that I showed you way back in the values.yaml when I was showing the YAML files that made up the deployment package. That told the orchestrator that it should create a service link for port 80 on this application. The service link will tunnel you all the way through to the Edge site, even if the Edge site's behind a NAT or behind a firewall. So let me click that. And there we are. We're inside of our WordPress blog, which is running on that particular Edge node. Okay, I'm going to try to deploy one more application, which is one of our AI library sample applications. And this is a RAG LLM chatbot demonstration application. So let me do that. It's in a deployment package called Chat Q&A. I'm not going to take the time to go through that deployment package. There's actually lots of values.yamls in there. So I'll tell it to deploy, or I'll tell it to upload that package, and we will see up here in the UI, the Chat Q&A package has showed up. And then I am going to deploy that package. Now this package, you can see it has a lot of additional options. The orchestrator allows you to override options that are in the profile. So these were all options that were made available that could be changed on a site-by-site basis. So things like my Hugging Face token, things like the model names, things like passwords and proxies. All of that stuff you can override when you're creating a deployment. So I'm going to go ahead and do this. Let me get over here to the deployments page. We can see the deployment Chat Q&A has showed up in there. It's in 0 of 1 status. Now it's going to take a little while to deploy that application, and I will speed this up. Okay, we can see the Chat Q&A application has completed installing. I can go inside of it just like I did with WordPress. Open this up, and we can see that inside of here there are many pods running. It's a little bit hard to see in the small window I've got here, but you can see lots of pods. And you can see lots of services, and just like with WordPress, I have set up that service link feature. So I can click on that. Now it's going to tell me I was recently using service link. I need to change the context over to Chat Q&A. And now here we are inside of Chat Q&A. Now this is a RAG LLM chatbot, so I have to upload a document to it first. I'll do that. I'm going to upload this genai.txt file. I'll hit upload. And the file has been uploaded successfully. So that is a text file that knows about generative AI. So I can ask the chatbot, what is generative AI? And it ought to be able to come up with an answer for me. Okay, we can see it's starting to spit out tokens here from its LLM that it used. And this completes our demo. So I showed provisioning an Edge node, creating a cluster on that Edge node, uploading 2 packages to the application catalog, and deploying 2 packages, both WordPress and Chat Q&A.